Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of cryptids horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story. If your child mentions a man with 3 yellow eyes, you need to listen. I'm sitting in the rocking chair in the corner of my son's room. In the opposite corner, there is a man-shaped silhouette, head cocked at an angle, staring at me with 3 yellow eyes. 2 of them are right where a human's eyes should be, but there is one settled about where I think the thing's forehead is. They glow softly just like my son had explained. Ever since it entered the room, there is a ringing in my ear that must be similar to tinnitus. Not especially painful, but irritating in a way that puts you slightly on edge. You'd know this damn thing was in here even if you didn't see it. It isn't moving right now, but occasionally it will. I'm not sure how to describe it. It blinks in and out, I guess. It blinks, and the head is turned at the opposite angle as dogs sometimes do when you talk to them. My son has talked about the man with 3 yellow eyes since he was able to form a coherent sentence. Every 4 or 5 nights he would wake up crying out for us, and one or both of us would head to his room to see what was wrong. We always turned on the hallway light to illuminate our way into his room, since the floor was often a minefield of scattered toys, placed in just such a way to puncture the foot of a groggy adult. He would tell us the man with 3 yellow eyes was in his room watching him. He never mentions him trying to hurt him, talk to him, or touch him, just watches him. Complaints of a headache often come along with these weekly events. We give him some ibuprofen, soothe him until he is calm, and down he goes. In the morning, he will recount the events again, but by mid-morning, all concerns of the man with 3 yellow eyes seem to fade away. At age 3, our son was still having his weekly occurrences of the man with 3 yellow eyes. It was summer break, and my wife, a school teacher, mentioned that she wanted to go visit her parents in another state, and I recommended it. It would give me a great chance to get a few things on the endless list of things to do knocked off. The thought also entered my mind that this may be the best chance for me to spend the night in my son's room and see if there was an environmental factor creating the illusion of the yellow-eyed intruder. I can still remember as a child that the silhouette of my jacket hanging on the door looked like a gremlin hanging from the hook. Other times the settling of our old house would produce a noise I was sure could only be caused by some ancient beast in the attic. We all grew up with our boogeyman, and I was determined to see what caused my son's confusion. Earlier this evening, after my wife and son departed for her parents, I performed my usual bedtime routine. Checked the door locks, quick microwave dinner, brushed my teeth, pajamas, and then off to bed. I shut off the light and stretched out in my son's twin-sized bed. As I hadn't slept in a twin since I was a child myself, there was some adjusting to be done before I was able to comfortably settle in. Glancing around the room, I didn't immediately notice anything that could be mistaken for the man with 3 yellow eyes. For nearly an hour, I looked around and continued to fail to find a culprit. Around 11 p.m., I began to noticeably begin drifting off to sleep when suddenly in front of me, 3 yellow dots appeared in my field of vision. With a shock, I jolted up in the bed and the 3 yellow dots disappeared. For a few minutes, I sat breathing heavily and laughing internally for letting myself get wrapped up in this boogeyman hunt. After I had calmed back down, I put my head back on the pillow and the 3 yellow dots slowly reappeared. Without the fog of sleep, I could see that the security light at the back of the house was able to make its way through 3 holes in the window blinds. There was a privacy hedge outside my son's window that blocked almost all of the light except for this small area. I began congratulating myself for solving the mystery so quickly. It must be some nocturnal animal that sets off the security light once or twice a week, and my son wakes up to 3 pinholes of light and in his sleepy haze thinks there is a mysterious creature watching him sleep. Feeling proud of myself for solving the mystery, I grab my phone off of his nightstand and get out of bed to head to my bedroom. No need to spend the rest of the night curled up in a twin bed when a comfortable king-size mattress awaits me. As I turned around to walk to the door, I could see a black silhouette shaped like a man blocking the exit. I froze in place, and as I came to a stop, that is when 3 yellow slits slowly opened and looked in my direction. After shaking my frozen posture, I yelled and began to charge in its direction, but stumbled backward when it began moving toward me at the same speed. At the same time, a ringing started in my ears. I stumbled backward into a chair in the corner, and as I fell into the chair, I saw the thing blink away and then into the opposite corner. I'm not sure how long I initially sat frozen in the chair, but the creature just stared, occasionally blinked in place, moving the position of its head. Eventually, I began to inch out of the chair, but it would blink back into the doorway. If I eased back into the chair, it would again blink back to the opposite corner and continue the emotionless gaze. A few times I've tried to make a call to emergency services on my phone, but all I can hear is white noise on the other line. So again, here I sit in this chair looking back at this thing. This man with 3 yellow eyes. I've spoken to it, but when it opens its mouth, it emits the same soft yellow glow and a series of clicking noises. It hasn't tried to hurt me and only moves to the door when I try to get up. I have no damn clue what to do. My phone will probably die soon, and sharing this is the only thing I can think to try. I'm not even sure this will get out. The man with 3 yellow eyes is still blinking in and out. But now when he blinks back, he is a little closer every time. I'm going to make a break for it soon since I don't have any other options, but I'm sure it won't work. If a child in your family tells you there is a man with 3 yellow eyes watching them sleep, then listen. It is here now looking at me and inching closer, so I guess it doesn't follow the kid that sees them. So get them away and don't look back. And for God's sake, don't go sleep in the room where they've been seen. Second story. My sister vanished 50 years ago. I wish I had died ignorant of her fate. April 19th, 1974 was the day when our family's world shattered into pieces, forever changing our lives. Prior to this day, we were merely an ordinary, happy family. We've never been rich, but we loved each other very much. My parents, my younger sister Valerie, and me, we had an inseparable bond. Siblings often don't get along too well, but that wasn't the case with us. I was 4 years older than Valerie, but I loved spending time with her and taking care of her. She was such a happy, bubbly girl. She was very smart, too. She learned how to read when she was just 4 years old, and she loved nature. Quite often, we used to visit our Uncle Rainer on his huge, beautiful farm. While we were there, playing and exploring, Valerie used to search for various plants and bugs, and then look them up in the thick botany and entomology books that our uncle kept in his impressive home library. We all held the conviction that she would become a biologist once she grew up. In the countryside, both us kids and our parents found joy, not just for its charm, but also as a refuge from our less safe neighborhood. Rumors circulated among other kids about shady characters and ex-cons, but our parents' strictness kept Valerie and me out of trouble, until that fateful day came and changed everything. In 1974, I was 12 and Valerie was 8. Due to her charming personality, it was unsurprising that she made numerous friends while attending primary school. Each morning, she greeted the new day early with a burst of energy, unlike me, who liked to sleep in. However, on that Friday morning, it wasn't the sound of my alarm that woke me up. It was the sudden, piercing scream of panic, my mother's voice shattering the calm, jolting me awake. That morning, Valerie didn't emerge from her room for longer than usual. Concerned, my mom went to check on her, only to find her room empty, the window open, and her bed vacant. I can barely recall any more details from that day and the following weeks. Fear and despair consumed us. The police were involved right away, and we held on to hope, praying for Valerie's safe return. But she never came back. I couldn't wrap my head around how one day my little sister was there with us. Everything was normal, and then she simply vanished, leaving no trace, as if she never existed. It felt like we had all been living in a beautiful dream, only to abruptly awaken to a harsh reality. From that moment on, our lives became empty shells, devoid of our previous happiness and carelessness. My parents changed. They appeared tired, pale, and thin, a stark contrast to their former selves. They didn't speak much to me about the ongoing search and investigation. Instead, they just told me to pray for Valerie every night and to be brave. Eventually, after a few months, they began saying that Valerie was now an angel in heaven, watching over our family. Initially, I couldn't bring myself to accept it. I didn't want her to be an angel. I wanted her to be there with us, just like before. It felt incredibly unfair. Why did it have to be her? Why did it happen to our family, out of all families? But time kept passing by. As the old saying goes, you can get used to hanging if you hang long enough. And that's exactly what we did. Life went on. My parents continued to do their best to look after me, but it was a struggle for them. A few weeks after Valerie disappeared, they both turned to drinking, and they never really stopped. I don't blame them for it, not anymore. As I grew older and had children of my own, I couldn't even bear to imagine what I would do if anything happened to them. It would destroy me. So I never turned my back on my parents. I cared for them until the very end. As you can imagine, their health suffered after years of drinking and misery. They both passed away a couple of years ago. As for Valerie, when I was around 20, I finally mustered the courage to ask my parents for more details. Unfortunately, they didn't have much to share. There were no foreign fingerprints found in her room, and no blood or bodily fluids that, with today's forensic technology, could aid in DNA identification of a perpetrator. The only evidence the police uncovered were a few muddy footprints left behind by men's boots, size 12. All men from our neighborhood with a criminal past were examined by the police, and search warrants were issued for a couple of houses. But still, there were no traces of my sister. Despite pursuing several leads, the authorities were unable to make any significant breakthroughs in the case. After that conversation, we never talked about Valerie again. I wasn't a child anymore, and I was aware of the cruel realities of the world. I couldn't bear to dwell on what might have happened to my dear little sister. The possibilities were simply too terrible. It's been 50 years now, though I couldn't tell you where all that time has gone. I've lived a fulfilling life and am now a grandmother, surrounded by loved ones in a different state. However, recent events called me back to Maine to handle family affairs. My Uncle Rainer passed away at the age of 90, leaving me as the sole beneficiary in his will, as he was never married and had no kids. I inherited his farm, which once served as a big playground for my sister and me. Now, it lay abandoned and neglected, in need of attention. I've made plans to visit my late uncle's home, sort through his belongings, and prepare the property for sale, keeping only a few mementos of his. While we weren't particularly close once I became an adult, he was still family. With the house in disarray, I've scheduled a 2-week stay to clean up and set things right. I decided to begin with his bedroom, which appeared to be the least cluttered of all the rooms. The first thing that caught my eye were 2 large, red boxes tucked beside his bed. They looked old and were filled with letters. Tons and tons of letters. It got me curious. My uncle was a mysterious man. Come to think of it, he must have been quite lonely on his big farm in the middle of nowhere, with no family and not so many friends. Yet, perhaps he had shared a deep connection with someone who deserved to know of his passing. So I picked up a couple of the letters from the nearest box and was surprised to conclude that all of them were written by him and appeared to never have been sent. They weren't dated, and they all started with "My dearest wife." As I said, my uncle was never married, so I was rather puzzled. I had heard whispers of his extensive travels before settling on the farm, leading me to speculate that he may have married abroad and kept it a secret. With him no longer among us, I reasoned that delving into his private correspondences wouldn't be overly intrusive. What can I say? I'm an older lady and I love me a good, old romantic tale. So I started to read. The letters were filled with declarations of my uncle's undying love for his unnamed wife and descriptions of his daily work on the farm. They were all similar. Nothing suggested who the woman was. With a tinge of disappointment, I opened the second box and picked up a letter from the top of the pile. Judging from its appearance, it has been written pretty recently. As I read it, a creeping sense of realization and dread enveloped me, causing the blood to drain from my face. You probably already suspected where this story is headed, right? To you, it was probably obvious from the beginning. But believe me, nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to uncover. I desperately wish I had remained in the dark. Without further delay, here is what my uncle penned in what would turn out to be his final letter. My dearest wife, my time has finally come. I can feel it deep within my weary bones. I am but a shadow of the young, strong, and handsome man you once knew. My life has stretched long, yet it has been a lonely journey since you left me. But we will meet again soon, and it makes me so incredibly happy. Thoughts of you have filled my every waking moment for decades. From the very first moment we spoke, I was captivated by your beauty, your extraordinary maturity, and intellect. You were the epitome of perfection, as if tailor-made for me. I had to have you. You know, I've never stopped celebrating our wedding anniversary. Every April 19th was a sacred day for me. Do you remember?
Ido.
When I close my eyes, I can relive the day when you finally entered my house as my bride. I've been waiting for it for so long. I remember the beautiful white dress I put on you and the flower crown I placed on your head as a symbol of your innocence. I remember our first night together. Light of my life, fire of my loins. It's such a shame that our love had to remain hidden. Most people are narrow-minded and judgmental, and they wouldn't accept us. That's why we had to live in the shadows, my love. I know it wasn't perfect. You complained quite a lot, darling, but I didn't mind. That's what women do all the time. You didn't like your room. You said it was too dark and too cold. But all I did was for your own good, so that we could have been happy together. We had only 4 beautiful years. Then it happened. It was so painful to lose our first child right after it was born. And you got so sick. There was so much blood. But I couldn't take you to the hospital. You knew that. Yet, your accusatory stare pierced me like a dagger. I had no choice but to let you go. A part of me died when I saw the light leave your eyes. But fate is relentless, indifferent to our pleas. I had to forge ahead alone, carrying within my heart your cherished memory. There's one thing I deeply regret, and that is that I couldn't give you a proper burial. Our love had to remain concealed, even after you were gone. So believe me when I say that I cried my heart out when I watched the pigs consume the vessel that once held your radiant spirit. For that, I am terribly sorry. I hope that when we finally meet in heaven, you'll be able to forgive me, and we'll spend the rest of eternity together. Until then, my beloved, your Rainer. Third story. The neighbors stopped smiling back. I loved that neighborhood. It was a small house that I bought in my late 20s. It seems unbelievable now to own a house on your own in your late 20s, but not so long ago it was even common. Still, I had to move a little into the suburbs and away from the city, but it was my house. My mother was worried. She said a woman living on her own in the suburbs can be very lonely. I brushed it off. I loved my new house and wouldn't feel lonely. My backyard was small, but I spent that first summer tidying up the backyard and installing several bird feeders. I am a bit of a birder myself. I even had a few birds fly into my open window in this house. It was a mess trying to get them out. Eventually, I got to know several of my neighbors very well. I never thought I would be one of those people, but I would stand next to my front window, just looking at the street, waving to my neighbors, and they waved back. That is until last month. It started off subtle at first. They just stopped waving back, no matter how I smiled or waved to them. Then they started making faces at me, even as I smiled back at them. It didn't matter who it was. Even Mrs. Finch stopped waving and smiling at me. Soon the friendliness of the neighborhood was gone. I tried to not let it dishearten me. I still tried to smile and wave as people walked past, but I did not get any more warm responses. Then one day, Mrs. Finch, who had always been friendly with me, knocked on my door and said, "I don't care what you do in your home, but I don't appreciate the looks that I get when I walk down the street." I tried to explain that I was just being friendly, but she cut me off. That is not being friendly. When I first moved in, all the neighbors were so welcoming. It seems that has now changed. I tried to not let it get to me. I had planned on being here for a while after all. Then the letters started coming in. Some were short. They would say leave. Other letters would go into details that I was a creep, staring at children as they walked by, making threatening gestures. Those letters saddened me so much. I love children and have only ever smiled at them. I then stopped standing in front of the windows as often, but I was determined to not let my neighbors push me around. Then I got another letter in the mail. This one was much longer. With the front door still open, I kept rereading the same paragraph over. What happens in your home is your business, but your husband should not be making threatening gestures to me and my children when I am walking them to school. If this continues, I'll be forced to call the police. I am not married. What is she talking about? I said aloud, still holding the letter. I was shaken out of my confusion by very sudden and loud creaks above me. They were footsteps, and I could hear them get closer. Then I saw him. It was a man. He was rushing down my stairs holding a knife. He was almost at the landing of the stairs when I finally snapped out of my confused state and ran out the open front door. I remember screaming and running, but I don't remember much else. Mrs. Field saw me screaming and running. I thought she hated me, but she opened her door for me, hugged me, and rushed me in. She called the police, and then asked me if my husband had attacked me. When the police came, I explained to them that I lived on my own and that a knife-wielding man came down my stairs to hurt me. The police said they searched my entire house and said they were confident the man was no longer in the house. They said he likely came in my house through one of the open windows. The police also found a manifesto of sorts. The man who was after me apparently did not want to hurt me at first. He just wanted me to leave the neighborhood. I am so sick of you city scum, ruining our beautiful neighborhood. For an entire month, this man had lived in my house, but I don't know how. Whenever I was waving to my neighbors downstairs, he was upstairs making throat-slitting motion with his hands to the same people I was waving at. The letter the man wrote stated that he realized that I wasn't going to leave, and that it was now up to him. If you city people wouldn't be here, I wouldn't have to do this. The police searched and searched my house. They assured me that there was no one in my house. I tried to believe them. I tried to sleep in that house. But that first night after the police left, every sound filled me with terror. I couldn't even make it through the night. At 3 a.m., I left and drove to my mother's. So that man got what he wanted. I no longer live in that neighborhood, and my house is now being put up for sale but still hasn't sold. It just sits there, vacant. I also no longer wave to my neighbors as they walk by. I am too afraid they won't wave back. Fourth story. My grandmother told me a scary bedtime story. Years later, I found out that the story she told me was horrifyingly true. I watched from a distance while my grandma and grandpa fished on their lake in the backyard. But one thing confused me. While grandpa cast his line and watched his rod, waiting for the anticipating tug of a fish, grandma's gaze remained fixed across the lake, her head tilted intently towards the dark fringe of woods. I never saw her look at the bobbing lures. She didn't even seem interested in fishing at all. I thought that maybe she just simply enjoyed looking at the trees. But a nagging feeling persisted. There was more to her gaze than a simple love for nature. It was summer break, and I decided to spend it at my grandparents' house in Knoxville, Tennessee. They lived in a two-story house, recently built in 2018. It connected directly to a lake, with a dock jutting out on the far right side where my grandpa kept his bass boat. My grandparents were a sweet and quiet couple. They kept to themselves most of the time, living a peaceful life in their little corner of the world. Every summer, though, my visits became a tradition. Grandma's invitation was always an automatic yes, her warm smile and gentle voice a beacon calling me back. There were countless things to love about my grandma, her kindness and generosity at the top of the list. If I wanted something, it was usually an automatic yes from her too. But one of the things I truly cherished most was her stories. Unlike Grandpa, who mostly stuck to tales of his time in the military, exciting stories filled with bravery and adventure. Of course, Grandma was a bottomless well of stories. Whether it was a funny story from her childhood, a heartwarming story about a kind neighbor, or a fantastical bedtime story that transported me to magical lands, Grandma always had one on hand. She was one of those special grandmas who could weave a story from thin air, her words painting vivid pictures in my mind. Grandpa, on the other hand, was a man of few words. A quiet strength emanated from him, and the stories he did tell were always about his service. He'd talk about the places he'd been, the challenges he'd faced, and the lessons he'd learned. While not as fantastical as Grandma's stories, they held a different kind of magic, a testament to his resilience and the experiences that shaped him. One of the things I always admired about Grandpa was his outdoor skills. He'd tell me most of his knowledge came from his military training, jokingly saying they prepared him for anything. He was a true outdoorsman, the kind of person I'd trust implicitly if we were ever lost in the wilderness. He knew everything about fishing, the best spots on the lake, the best techniques to catch different types of fish. Some of my favorite memories were spent on his boat, cutting through the cool morning water, the sun rising over the horizon, and the gentle hum of the motor a comforting lullaby. Every night, Grandma dipped into her seemingly endless well of stories. I never quite understood how she did it. Her mind was like a sprawling library, shelves overflowing with stories to tell. One night, she'd tell me a story of brave knights seeking vengeance, their swords gleaming in the sun. Another night, she'd tell me a story of a land shimmering with magic spells and cursed lands. Then there were the scary stories. Now, Grandma usually avoided them. She knew how they affected me. But the thing about those stories was the detail. Oh man, the detail. They were so vivid, so real. It felt like I was peeking through a crack into another world. A world where the monsters and creatures she described lurked. A world so terrifying that I felt like falling through that crack would kill me. Every night was the same routine. Nestled under a patchwork quilt in the guest room, I'd wait with bated breath. The soft click of the doorknob was my cue. Grandma, her face etched with a lifetime of stories, would enter, a gentle smile gracing her lips. She'd pull up a rocking chair, its rhythmic creak adding to the lullaby effect. Then, in a warm voice, she'd begin telling me a story. One night, though, tucked under the patchwork quilt, I waited for Grandma's nightly visit. The soft click of the doorknob announced her arrival. "Ready for another story?" she asked, her voice a warm rumble. I nodded eagerly. Nights at Grandma's were journeys to magical lands, each story more thrilling than the last. But tonight, I craved a different kind of story, a different kind of excitement. "Can you tell me a scary story tonight, Grandma?" I blurted out. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, followed by a thoughtful pause. Unlike her usual repertoire of action-packed adventures, her stories have always steered clear of scary ones. She sat beside me on the patchwork quilt, her usual mischievous eyes replaced by a thoughtful gaze. Her eyes flickered towards the window for a moment before returning to me. Then, with a gentle smile, she began. "Those woods outside your window," she started, her voice a warm rumble. I instinctively glanced towards the window, the familiar silhouette of the trees, outlined across the lake. "There's something in those woods," she continued, her voice dropping to a hushed whisper. A shiver danced down my spine, though the room remained pleasantly warm. Those simple words made me so uncomfortable that I was tempted to just tell Grandma to stop, but the truth was, I was hooked. Grandma did tell me scary stories on rare occasions, but they were always fictional, completely disconnected from the real world. She continued, "Every 7 years, it comes out of those woods. It emerges, a creature that's been on this earth for thousands of years. It crawls on all fours. It hunts, a silent predator searching for its prey." I began to tense up a little. The room remained quiet, but the air felt heavy. "Its body is like a man, but twisted and contorted," she murmured, "and its limbs elongated, reaching out at odd angles. Its skin is black as coal, making it difficult to spot during the night." I swallowed hard, my eyes instinctively drawn back to the window. The trees, once comforting, now seemed to writhe with unseen shadows. "But the worst part," she continued, her voice barely a tremor, "is its eyes, multiple eyes, scattered across its head like a spider. They pierce the darkness, searching for an unsuspecting victim." She continued, her voice a hushed whisper, sending shivers down my spine. "Sometimes, if it has trouble finding prey, it ventures closer, closer to houses, searching for unlocked windows." My breath caught in my throat. The image of eyes peering through the glass sent a jolt of terror through me. "If it finds an opening," she murmured, "it will crawl inside and snatch the closest person to it, dragging them back to the woods." I squeezed my eyes shut, the warmth of the quilt a poor barrier against the sudden chill. "It keeps its victims alive for 7 long years," she whispered, "feeding off them slowly until the hunger returns and it's time to hunt once more." My grip tightened on the blanket and my knuckles were white. A cold sweat was dripping down my skin. "But don't you worry," she said, her voice gentling. "As long as we keep the windows locked, we'll be safe. And don't forget to do the same at your mom's house." She rose from the quilt, her smile strained at the edges. a smile meant to reassure, but one that couldn't hide the sliver of unease in her eyes. Her movements seemed slow and deliberate as she walked towards the window. My eyes followed her, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. She stared out of the window for a moment, as if checking to make sure the thing wasn't around, and then she checked to make sure the window was locked. Just as she was about to turn away, I blurted out, unable to contain the question that had lodged itself in my throat. "Grandma, have you ever seen it?" She paused for a few moments, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face before a reassuring smile crept onto her lips. She didn't answer me. She simply leaned down and kissed my forehead, a gesture filled with a strange intensity. "Good night, darling," she whispered. Then, with a gentle click, she shut my door behind her. I was awake for most of that night, staring at the darkened window pane. The familiar silhouette of the woods outside now held a new kind of terror. I kept wondering if I would see that face my grandma described, a face with multiple eyes staring back at me. Eventually, exhausted from fear and lack of sleep, my eyelids drifted shut, and I finally drifted off. While I slept, I dreamt of its form shifting and writhing in the darkness. I ran, my legs pumping, but it was like I was running on ice. Panic seized me as the figure lunged, its long arms wrapping around my legs. It dragged me, a rag doll, through the grass, the stench of damp grass filling my nostrils. The woods grew bigger as the thing dragged me there, its jagged edges threatening to devour me whole. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Just as the branches of the trees were about to engulf me, I jolted awake, gasping for breath. Light streamed through the window, painting familiar shapes on the ceiling. The room held a peaceful stillness. It took several deep breaths to slow the pounding of my heart. Relief washed over me, chasing away the lingering dread. Since that night, despite Grandma's steady stream of new stories, the creature in the woods has remained a constant shadow in the corner of my mind. Thankfully, the nightmares, those terrifying chases through endless woods, didn't last. Slowly, the story faded from memory. A few years later, a different kind of darkness descended upon our family. Cancer, a cruel, selfish thief, stole my grandmother's health bit by bit. She fought for months, but in the end, the disease won. It left a hole in our lives, especially for Grandpa. Now, he lives alone, the silence of the house heavy with her absence. Talking about her seems to bring a fresh wave of pain, etched deep into the lines on his face. Sometimes, he murmurs about just waiting for his turn to join her. It's a heartbreaking sight. A man transformed into a solitary figure, simply waiting to die. That year was a blur of grief, a dark tunnel we all had to navigate. But with the love and support of family and friends, we eventually managed to pull through. With each passing year, the grief lessened, but Grandma's memory remained. Then, after another few years, during my senior year in high school, something happened. I walked into the house after a long day. The familiar scent of an empty house greeted me. Mom had already left for work. Pulling my backpack onto my bed, I pulled out my books and settled in for an evening of homework, studying, and the occasional break to watch TV. I shut off the TV, changed into my pajamas, and crawled into bed. Sleep, however, remained elusive. My mind was a tangled mess, tossing and turning over the events of the day. Finally, I peeked at the clock on my desk, its green glow reading almost 3 a.m. Just then, a sound shattered the silence, a sharp tap that echoed through the room. My eyes flew open, snapping towards the window. A wave of ice washed over me, freezing my blood solid. Memories of Grandma's story flooded back. The creature, the woods. There, pressed against the glass, was a form that blocked most of the moonlight from filtering in. If not for the sliver of moonlight peeking in around what was blocking it, I wouldn't have been able to see it at all. Its human-shaped body pressed against the window, and across its head, I could have sworn I saw movement, a flicker, like multiple tiny insects scurrying across its flesh. Then, a horrifying realization dawned on me. They weren't insects. They were eyelids. Eyelids flickering open and shut, scanning my room with frantic urgency. My breath hitched. Was this a dream? Just then, a shadowy limb, long and impossibly thin, snaked out towards the base of my window. Had I locked the window? The sickening sound of the window, as the glass began to slide up, hit my ears. Terror choked and screamed in my throat. There are woods behind my mom's house too, and a sickening realization dawned on me. This wasn't just a story. It was real, and it was here. Adrenaline surged through me, and my flight or fight responses kicked in. I threw myself out of bed in a desperate scramble. My feet pounded the floor as I bolted towards the door, flinging it open, but my escape was cut short. The door slammed shut in my face, the force of it throwing me backward. A strangled cry escaped my lips as a wave of terror washed over me. My body locked up, and every muscle seized in a silent scream. Somehow, it was now in my room, that fast. It was no longer at the window. It was now above me, above my door. One of its grotesquely long limbs, tipped with a hand like a spider's claw, pressed firmly against the door, pinning me inside. Another seemed contorted at an unnatural angle, its fingers splayed against the wall in a grotesque parody of a grip. The head, if you could call it that, twisted on its neck in a way that defied human anatomy, almost spinning completely around. A chorus of eyes locked onto me. Trapped and alone, I stumbled back, my mind scrambling for any flicker of hope. The second floor was an escape route, but a leap out the window would likely result in injury, leaving me in a vulnerable position. Besides, that's where it probably wanted me. Right next to the door stood my wooden baseball bat. In a desperate lunge, I grabbed it, the wood rough against my grip. With a yell, I swung the bat with all my strength, connecting with a sickening thud. Splinters of wood rained down as the impact sent a tremor through the room. The creature recoiled slightly, its multiple eyes flickering in what might have been surprise. But the silence that followed was the most unsettling part. No roar of pain, no growl. This thing moved with an unnatural quiet. Even as it moved, it made no noise. It descended to the floor, its grotesque form dwarfing the space in my room. As it loomed closer, lowering its body in a predatory crouch, I swung the mangled bat wildly. The bat connected, with a bone-crunching impact, sending more shards of wood flying through the air. The creature recoiled, its grotesque form momentarily faltering. Seizing my chance, I bolted past the thing, flung open the bedroom door, and slammed it shut behind me with a resounding bang. Adrenaline pumping, I raced down the stairs, each step echoing in the sudden silence. Reaching the living room, I fumbled for the light switch, illuminating the space with a warm glow. Panting, I gripped the broken bat like a lifeline. Its splintered end pointed towards the top of the stairs, towards the thing in my room. Suddenly, a new sound pierced the tense silence, the creak of the front door opening. A silhouette emerged from the doorway, the dim porch light casting long shadows across her face. "There you are." My mom's voice, laced with exhaustion. "What the hell are you?" The sentence died on her lips, completely cut short. Her eyes widened, but neither she nor I had time to react. In a sharp and quick moment, a shadowy, distorted limb, tipped with a spidery claw, shot out, wrapping around my mother's waist. It snagged her, sinking its talons deep into her flesh, a sickening tear echoing in the sudden silence. A strangled noise bubbled in her throat, cut short before it could form a scream. But then, I heard her scream fully formed as the thing dragged her away to the woods. I ran with all my effort, but the thing was fast, too fast. All I could do was keep running, watching, as my mom screamed with her arms folded around the creature's arm in a desperate attempt to escape. It had her, though, exactly where it wanted her, out in the open. I fell face first into the grass, a sob wrenching its way out of my chest. Warm tears streamed down my face, blurring my vision as I watched in horror. Mom's screams turned into blood-curdling shrieks, fading into a horrifying silence, as they disappeared into the indistinguishable maw of the woods. The police came, but what could they do? What could I tell them? I told them exactly what I saw. They looked at me like I was crazy, but what else could I say? For hours, I sat in a sterile interrogation room, the harsh overhead light blurring my vision. They questioned me over and over, dissecting my story, searching for inconsistencies. But all I could do was repeat the horrifying scene, my voice cracking with each retelling. There was no evidence to tie me to my mom's disappearance, nothing but my frantic pleas and the raw terror etched onto my face. Finally, they seemed to reach a reluctant roadblock. With a sigh and a dismissive glance, they released me. Now, a search party combs the backyard, venturing into the dense woods behind our house. Bloodhounds sniff the damp earth, their mournful howls echoing through the trees. In my room, the silence pressing down on me like a physical weight. As the harsh light of dawn breaks, I stare at the window. A large handprint, a grotesque, splayed imprint of multiple fingers, clings to the outside of the glass. A cold realization settles over me. Now I know that at least one of my grandma's stories is real. Fifth story. I was in a cult that summoned demons. I think they found me. I haven't thought about this for a long time, but recently, whatever we summoned has found me. As I type this, I can hear tapping on my windows and that god-awful voice. It started years ago. I was a normal young woman, a job waiting for me on the horizon. When it happened, I found a pamphlet in my mail. The pamphlet itself didn't automatically cause me concern. It looked like a normal religious flyer. But the thing that stuck out was the phrase, "Do you crave everything your heart desires? Raylex can help you." Raylex? I whispered, confused but curious, and kept reading. "Our community noticed you." "Yes, you, Danielle." My eyebrow rose. How do they know my name? I thought to myself. My eyes widen as they land on the next sentence. This was a distraction. Welcome to the cult of Raylex. Then, everything went dark. When I woke up, I immediately noticed that I was tied to a chair, and someone had changed my clothes. Now I was wearing a long white dress. I look around, noticing I'm not the only one in the room. There are other girls in chairs, all wearing long white dresses. The dresses are the only thing that we share, because I can see females from different nationalities. In fact, a noise that caught my attention finally sinks in. It's this Asian woman sitting across from me. I can't understand what she's saying. It sounds Korean, but I can tell she's scared. I'm scared now too. That genuine look of fear in the Korean women's eyes just clinching the fear. "Welcome, ladies, to the cult of Raylex." A deep voice booms, making me and the other women look around. But we can't find the source of the voice. You're probably wondering why you're here, the voice continues. Well, I'll explain. In the past, you females were only seen as one thing, childbearers and wives, the voice rants. But our cult sees that women have the most remarkable power. They can carry a human in their bodies for 9 months, then bear the pain of giving birth to that human. We found that ability gives the female race an amazing power. You, and you alone, can hold the soul of our savior, the great Raylex. The voice proclaims, making other voices pipe up with stuff like, Raylex be praised, and all hail Raylex. The praises probably would have gone on longer if the deep voice didn't boom out, silence. Once the voices calmed, the voice continued. Now, you all have a job to do. As the voice says this, people in robes appear out of nowhere. 2 approach this fire pit in the middle of the ring of chairs. Then they light a roaring fire. The voice continues. You all have one chance. Pick out from your personal items the one that means the most to you, then throw it in the fire. As the voice says that, more robed figures appear, each holding a bag. One approaches me, unties me, then holds the bag out to me. I take it. Inside I see that apparently these guys ransacked my room. I see the other females also going through their bags. I decide the best course of action is to find that item. I search the bag. I see 2 options immediately. Both items means a lot to me. The first is a necklace, a simple, beautiful thing with a purple eye hanging from it. The second, a picture. It's of me and my boyfriend. I lost him, so this picture means the world. My eyes well with tears. I decide on the picture, even though the necklace would have held more. I hold the picture, waiting to see if the voice comes back. It does, but not in a way I expect. The voice laughs, then addresses me directly. Confused, Danielle? Don't wait. Just throw it in. Right as I was about to do this, something occurs to me. See, the necklace was from my mother. She said it was a protective talisman. She always said, that purple I can see things mommy can't, so it'll protect you when I can't. Thinking about this, I palm the necklace, hiding it by holding it against my leg, then threw the picture in the fire. I see the other women are doing the same, except for the Korean women. She's sobbing, clutching a picture and lock of hair. Her sobs getting the attention of me and the other girls. She starts pleading in broken English. Please don't make me. Please. Picture is only one I have of my daughter. She gone. Please. Don't make me. My eyes well up with tears of sympathy for the poor woman. Another woman gasps and starts angrily ranting in Swedish. I can only make out one English sentence from the Swedish women, which is, you monsters. Again the booming voice shouts silence, which makes the Swedish woman immediately shut up. My tears spill over. The voice calms, sounding charismatic again. Everyone has to do it. Raylex needs a pace of you, the voice explains. We can't do what we need if you don't throw that item in the fire from some reason. This breaks the Korean woman. She reaches into her bag, pulls out a gun, and aims it at her head, taking fire. The gunshot rings out, and me and others gasp and look away. The voice sighs. Remove the body. It instructs the robed figures still in the room. They approach and drag the women's body out of the room. After a moment of silence, THD voice comes back. Now, we will be placing you in this field. There, you will be controlled. You don't have a choice. Your bodies will be borrowed by our members. The voice explains. The Swedish woman pipes up. And what if we don't? She spits out, clearly still angry at the cult. The voice chuckles darkly, and a TV is rolled into the room. You will after this, is all the voice says, before one of the cult members presses play. I don't remember what I saw, but it did something to me. I wasn't the same. Suddenly it felt like I wasn't the only soul possessing my body. It gets vague after this, brief glimpses of darkness, a van, and us being driven away. Once I become more aware again, clearly the guy possessing me is having a hard time controlling my mind because I'm still there. I see we are in a field, and we are alone. It's desert as far as I can see. I sense me and females are in danger, but I can't tell where the danger is coming from. The outspoken Swedish woman looks at me, then the others, then speaks. "Follow me," she says blankly, her eyes void of life and emotions. I can tell it isn't her speaking, but the cult member using her body. We do follow, again pulled by the unseen force of the cult. I look at this woman next to me. She has dark hair and green eyes. She looks at me, smiles warily, and keeps walking. Another one reaches out and plays with my hair. "I love your hair," she says, as blankly as the Swedish girl did. My hair is long and light blonde, almost white. I find myself answering before I can stop it. "Thank you." My stomach inwardly drops. "That's not my voice," is the only thing I can think. Once we are further into the field, the Swedish girl stops, then looks at us. "Stand in a circle and hold hands." She directs. We do it, waiting for the next instruction. She nods. "Repeat after me," she says, then begins chanting. I don't know the language, it sounds Latin, but the soul in me repeats the words flawlessly. The day, 1 second sunny and bright, the next becomes dark, a cloud forming in the sky above us. We continue the chant. Suddenly I feel and see a lightning bolt hit me, making me and the others girls start screaming. I feel myself lifts a foot off the ground, looking around to see that I'm not the only one affected. The whole group of us are now being levitated off the ground. But something I see makes a pit of fear well in my stomach. Their eyes are white. No pupils, no irises, just white. And whatever is in me gives me an out-of-body view of myself to show that my eyes are also pure white. Then I hear a voice in my head. A creaky, deep, demonic-sounding voice. It laughs. What a beautiful group my followers brought me, it rasps. My soul itself wants to run at this point. The voice feels wrong and evil. But something about what it says next causes me to break from my trance. This is only the beginning. It creaks. "My darling girls, we will rule the world." My trance breaks and I drop to the ground. I notice I'm the only one who broke the trance. The other women still in the air, eyes still pure white. I heard that god-awful voice cackling in my head as I run. I run as fast as I can. It feels like hours before I finally find a road, a car coming. I start waving frantically to get the driver's attention, which works. The female behind the wheel worries over me, asking if I need the cops or the hospital, but all I want to do is go home. So I tell her my address, and we head there. Over the next few years, I repress the memories. I just want things to go back to normal. And I thought it did. That was until recently. I found a paper in my mailbox. The only thing on it was the words, "You can run, but you can't hide, Danielle. It's coming for you." My blood runs cold, and ever since I got that note, there have been tapping sounds at my window. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.